Hello again. 75 years ago today, a passenger ship docked at the Essex port of Tilbury and disgorged between 500 and 800 Caribbeans who had decided to come and chance their luck in Britain. This event has become encrusted with so many myths and legends that a false version of what happened that day has now become almost universally accepted as the truth. Here is a good summary of that fake history. In 2018, an article called "You Called and We Came" appeared in the journal Therapy Today, and the opening sentences tell the untruthful story in a nutshell. I quote, "On the 22nd of June 1948, the Empire Windrush arrived at Tilbury Docks, Essex, with 492 passengers on board. Most of the passengers were from the Caribbean islands that formed part of the Commonwealth and had been invited over by the British government to help with the post-war reconstruction and workforce shortages." I give a link to this article in the description to the video. Various versions of this statement have been appearing in the run-up to Windrush Day, and viewers will certainly hear and see many times today that Caribbeans came to Britain after the war to help rebuild this country. The Royal Mint endorses this version of events in their advertisement for the 50p coin, which they've released, commemorating the arrival of the Empire Windrush. I give a link to this too in the description to this video. We read of the Caribbeans who arrived in the post-war years. They played a pivotal role in rebuilding the UK after the Second World War. This then is the fiction, which has been repeated so often now that it is accepted unquestioningly by people in this country. You called and we came, rebuilding the UK after the Second World War. Let us begin with the HMT Empire Windrush, which was heading to Britain in 1948 from Australia. It was carrying servicemen, various British passengers, and also some Polish people who had been picked up in Mexico. There was still plenty of room on board, and so the shipping company decided to see if they could increase their profits a little by advertising places for those from Jamaica who wished to travel to Britain. On April the 15th, an advertisement appeared in the Jamaican Daily Gleaner, which simply read, "Passenger opportunity to the United Kingdom. Troop ship Empire Windrush sailing about May 23rd. Fares, cabin class £48, troop deck £28. Royal Mail Lines Limited at 8 Port Royal Street." That's it. And I give a link to this advertisement, also in the description to this video. This was nothing to do with the British government, and nor were any offers of work or employment made in the advertisement. Nobody was asking for any Caribbeans to come here. It was simply said that tickets were available. The British government was not pleased when they heard that a bunch of Caribbeans were heading to Britain, but there was little that could be done to prevent them from landing. The Colonial Office, though, said that they would take steps to discourage similar waves of immigration. And the truth is that nobody really wanted people to come to this country from the Caribbean. This then is what you might call the founding myth of the Windrush Generation. Those Caribbeans on the Windrush came here at our invitation to help rebuild Britain. They did not. They were not invited. They simply turned up. But wait a minute. Surely we wanted people to come from the West Indies to work on the buses and railways and so on. What about all those nurses? Surely we invited them. In the decade following the end of the Second World War, what one might describe, not inaptly, as the post-war years, between 1,000 and 2,000 Caribbeans a year travelled to Britain on spec, as it were. It was a drop in the ocean for the working age population in Britain in the mid-1950s was 30 million, and by 1955 perhaps 8 or 9,000 Caribbeans had come. It was a tiny drop in the ocean, really. There weren't enough of them to make any difference about rebuilding anything. In any case, they had not been invited, but came to this country because their prospects seemed better than in their own countries. In Barbados, to give one example, the unemployment rate was an incredible 25%, and people were desperate for work and money. They couldn't get it in their own country, so they would try elsewhere. It was this which drove them to come to Britain, rather than any desire to help the motherland, another expression you will perhaps see bandied about today in the mass media. Anybody who really wants to know what Caribbeans coming to this country were saying and thinking, what motivated them to come here, could do worse than read this book. It's The Lonely Londoners by Samuel Selber. It was written in 1955 and published in 1956. He was an immigrant from Trinidad. It's brilliantly written, and it describes perfectly the Caribbean community at that time in London. The chief motivation of those arriving was personal advancement. In other words, getting a job and having a higher standard of living than they would enjoy in the West Indies. Rebuilding Britain or helping the mother country are not mentioned. The first action taken by a British employer to recruit workers from the Caribbean did not take place until 1956, 11 years after the end of the war, by which time most of the rebuilding had already been done. This recruiting drive was in any case undertaken at the request of a Caribbean nation to help out that country rather than for the benefit of Britain. In Barbados, about a quarter of the workforce was standing idle, and there was widespread unrest and fears of political violence. The government approached London Transport, that is to say the Bajan government, approached London Transport and asked if they could come and arrange for the emigration of some unemployed men from Barbados and take them off to Britain. This was for the benefit of Barbados and at their request. I give a link to a piece from the Runnymede Trust about this in the description to this video, but the London Transport Museum in Covent Garden also has a display about this which tells exactly the same story. What about Enoch Powell and the nurses from the Caribbean, though? There is a bizarre and completely false urban myth that Enoch Powell, as health minister in the early 1960s, was somehow connected with recruiting nurses for the NHS from Caribbean countries. This idea has been invented because it would be so deliciously ironic if Enoch Powell, of all people, were to have invited people from the Caribbean to come and live in Britain. It is even claimed that he visited the West Indies to urge nurses to come and help out the NHS. This too is a lie. He had absolutely nothing to do with the business. The Ministry of Health, as it was then, played no part at all in the recruitment of staff. This was left entirely in the hands of local health authorities. It is true that some health authorities did arrange for young women in Jamaica and other countries of the Caribbean who wanted to train as nurses to come here for 3 years, but this was not meant to be immigration. They were offered the chance of studying and qualifying at a hospital in this country, and while they were learning, they would work in hospitals, thus earning their keep and providing a useful boost to the staffing levels of the NHS. It was thought that most would return to their own countries at the end of the training so they could help build up the health services in Caribbean nations. Nobody expected them to stay in this country for good. I have touched upon a few of the main myths about the Windrush generation, and in a short video of this kind it is scarcely possible to do more. I hope, though, that this has been enough to alert viewers to the fact that they have been, and are being, massively misled by the British government and everybody else about the true nature of post-war immigration to this country. There is a good deal more to be said, but I would not wish to lay myself open to the accusation that I am in some way obsessed with immigration and race, so I shall leave this topic, at least for now.